Welcome to the Invest for More Real Estate Podcast. My name is Mark Ferguson, and I am your host. I'm a house flipper. I flip 10 to 15 houses a year. I own 13 rental properties with a goal to buy 100 by 2023. I'm also a real estate agent. I've been licensed since '01. I run a team of 9. We sell close to 200 houses a year. So on this show, we like to interview house flippers, landlords, and the best real estate agents in the business. So stay tuned for some great shows. If you want more information on my rentals, on the numbers, how I buy properties, check out InvestFourMore.com. Hey everyone, it's Mark Ferguson with Invest for More. Welcome to another episode of the Invest for More Real Estate Podcast. Today I'm very excited. I've got a very interesting guest, Jay Thompson, who is the Director of Industry Outreach at the Zillow Group, will be joining us. So I'm excited to talk to Jay. He also used to own a brokerage, so he's been on both sides of the real estate business. I'm going to talk about Zillow, talk about how he got started in real estate, and hopefully learn a few things along the way. Jay, thank you for being on the show. How are you today?
I'm good, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you being on. You know, one thing I always start with all my guests, I know you used to own a brokerage. Obviously, you've been in the real estate industry for a long time. How did you first get started in real estate, and what attracted you to the business?
It's a great question. I was in corporate America for decades, and in the semiconductor manufacturing industry, which has absolutely nothing to do with real estate, but it's a very cyclical industry, and towards the end, I was in human resources in that business, and the industry went through a big, giant downturn, and as I was an HR manager closing factories and laying people off, I knew that it was only a matter of time until that happened to me, and sure enough, it did. So I got a really nice severance package from my employer because I'd been there for 22 years, and at that point, I was so fed up with corporate America that I decided, you know what, I want to do something different. I want to run my own business, be my own boss, be in charge. And we had some friends that were in real estate sales, had been in for about a year or two at that time. And I looked at my wife and I said, well, we've got enough to live off this severance package for a while. It's a good little nest egg. Let's give this real estate thing a shot. And so that's what we did. And I was in Arizona at the time, so I got my sales license in 2004. And in Arizona, you have to be licensed for 3 years before you can take your broker's classes and sit for your broker's exam. So that was always, from day one, the goal was to open a small independent brokerage. So we did our 3 years, and we're pretty successful at it. And decided at that point to sit for the brokers, take the broker classes, sit for the exam, get our broker's license, or I'd get my broker's license, and my wife and I would open a small independent brokerage, which is what we did. So that would have been roughly 2010 or so. And that's kind of how the whole real estate thing started. It was kind of a natural fit with my human resources experience in that selling real estate is, oftentimes you're everything, right? You're a marriage counselor, you're a confidant, you help people through very complex transactions. So that HR experience, that working with people and developing those people skills was super helpful because obviously real estate's a very people-intensive industry. So it worked out really well.
No, that's awesome. I know what you mean about being all things to all people as an agent. I've been communication between parents and their kids because they weren't talking to each other during a transaction. Yep. So it's never fun, but you have to be very flexible as an agent.
Yes, you do.
And actually, my team manager, Justin, was in the corporate world for about 10 years, and he saw the same thing. He kept laying off people, downsizing, and he's just like, when's this going to happen to me? And he actually got out and joined my team before he was downsized himself, but yep. He felt the same way, kind of trapped in that world, and I think he's pretty happy he's out of it as well. So being an agent, opening your own brokerage, how difficult was that? Is it tough managing people? Did you keep it really small? How was opening your own brokerage?
It is tough. At my job in the semiconductor business, I managed hundreds and hundreds of people, but obviously it's a totally different environment. So I was used to managing people, and I worked with people well. And for me, that was the key. I mean, we never wanted to be a big giant brokerage. I mean, the highest agent count we ever had was 32. So the intent from day one was to kind of be a small, independent, it sounds kind of hokey and cliche, but a family-run type of business. So I didn't have to worry too much about, recruiting. I didn't have to worry at all about recruiting hundreds and hundreds of agents because that wasn't in our model. The model was to have 20 or 30 experienced, very good agents, and finding them was a little tricky because we had a certain culture that we wanted to instill in the brokerage, but found most of my initial set of agents were basically friends that I'd worked with as individual agents before. Some of them came over. Then I never really did any active recruiting, but my agents would say, hey, I was working with, Betty Sue, and she was on this cross deal, and she was awesome. She's super good. She's nice. She would fit in well. And then we would just kind of approach Susie Q and say, hey, I'm thinking about joining our brokerage. We'd love to have you. So we just kind of built it through very slow, very organic growth. Not a lot of, I didn't bombard emails trying to look for agents. It was never an agent count kind of thing. It was always intended to stay small. So I think that helped a lot. It made it much easier to manage super sharp agents that were very personable. We never really had any personality conflicts because as a former HR manager, I probably had more direct hiring experience than most brokers do. Most brokers get their start as a real estate agent, and a lot of times they don't have either the academic background or the work experience to hire the right people. I was fortunate in that I had that coming out of the HR industry. So hiring small and not trying to blow up too fast, it really wasn't too bad. I thoroughly enjoyed it. We had some great agents, and it was a lot of fun.
That's great. And that's a decent sized brokerage. 30 agents is a lot of people. Did you find yourself in your day-to-day, were you still selling houses as an agent, or did you pretty much become a manager for the office, taking care of the agents and everything else?
Yeah. Really, really good question. Our splits were pretty aggressive, and in the beginning, my wife and I both had to sell real estate because when you have 5 agents on a 90-10 split, you just can't make enough money to shoe the children and to eat. So my wife and I both actively sold for the first several years that the brokerage was in play, but once we hit about roughly an agent count of 20, then it became too much to manage and sell real estate. And we didn't really need to sell real estate anymore. By the time we hit 20, 25 agents, there's a little sweet spot in there where the income we got from their splits was enough to offset income that we got from selling real estate. So I'd say we actively sold real estate probably for the first 2 years, and then once we hit that 20-ish agent count, we shifted more from kind of being sales agents and running the brokerage on the side, so to speak, to really being full-time, managing transactions, managing the agents. I supplied our agents with a lot of leads, so that took a lot of time. So it was just kind of a tipping point around that 20 agent point where we were able to shift from having to sell real estate into not having to sell real estate and being able to apply, all of our time to the brokerage.
Yep, that makes sense. And I see quite a few brokerages in my area where you have a mix, some brokers who are selling and managing, and some offices where they have a broker who, their only job is recruiting and management. It always seems like when their only job is management and recruiting, that office does a lot better because they're not scattered everywhere trying to do 10,000 things. Very cool. One question I have too is you've obviously tried to build very successful agents, very high-level agents. Do you mind sharing a couple traits that the most successful agents had in your brokerage? What were they doing that made them successful?
This is going to almost sound like a cop-out answer probably, but honestly, hard work is the key. I use this story all the time because it's the truth. I could take my agents, say I had 20 of them, and if I sorted my agents by how hard they worked, just, they're grinding it out every day. They'll take the listing that's a little bit further away than other people want to drive, just agents that are grinding out the hard work. And if I sorted my list of agents by, here's the hardest worker at the top and here's the least hardest worker on the bottom, their GCI, their gross commission income, would almost line up perfectly. So it really it's hard work. Selling real estate is hard work. It's you're constantly prospecting and filling that pipeline, and it's really easy if you get a couple of deals in escrow, and things are going well. It's super easy to lose track of the fact that, hey, once these 2 or 3 transactions close, if you don't have anything ready to go in the pipeline, you're not getting paid for a month. So hard work and dedication was probably the primary driver. Now, I say that with a little bit of caution. I think it has to be the right kind of work, because it'd be really easy to, and I'm doing air quotes, which you can't see on a podcast. If you work hard at the wrong things, it's really not going to be that productive. So, by working hard, I'm talking about the ones that realize that a big chunk of selling real estate successfully is prospecting. You've got to fill that pipeline with potential clients. Because once that pipeline runs dry, you're out of luck. It's going to take you a long time to fill it back up, and then you've got to get a closing. Then you've got to, the deal actually has to close before you get a paycheck. So agents that were really good, or at least understood the importance of continuous prospecting. As I said earlier, real estate is such a people-based business. It's so emotional for a buyer or a seller. You don't buy or sell a home very often. It's a daunting process. Most people don't understand it. So agents that would work hard with prospecting, that were good at communicating the sales process and keeping their clients informed during that sales process, those were the ones that tended to rise to the top. And they rose to the top pretty quickly.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree with that. I'm not the broker in my office, but I operate a team within our office. And my broker always jokes around how it's funny how the people who actually show up to the office and work are the ones that do the most deals and sell the most houses. But you're right, too, about doing the right kind of work, because I know a lot of agents who are always taking classes or working on their website or doing all this busy work that isn't really prospecting. It's just kind of, well, I'm working, so I must be doing something right. But you've got to do the right stuff. I completely agree with you on that.
Exactly.
Cool. So you had your successful brokerage. You had it kind of set up so that you were managing it. You weren't selling anymore. And then at some point, you decided to start working with Zillow. How did that happen?
That's another great question. I was a big blogger when I was a real estate agent. My blog generated a lot of contacts and a lot of leads for our business. And because Zillow, from day one, which for Zillow was roughly February of 2006, always in the news, I tended to write fairly often about Zillow, as most real estate bloggers did back when Zillow first launched, because it's this new thing. What's Zillow? What's it going to mean? So I wrote a lot of opinion pieces about it on my blog. I got to know some of the people at Zillow through that blog, met them at conferences and things like that. And I was always fascinated by the company, just because I'm a bit of a nerd at heart, and technology interests me. And this is, I'm talking back in 2006 and 2007, right when Zillow had first launched. There wasn't a whole lot of real estate on the internet, and it just made sense to me that that's kind of where it was headed. So I'd always had this interest in Zillow. To make a long story short, Zillow hired the CEO of my MLS, the Arizona Regional MLS at the time. They hired away our CEO to do vice president of industry something or other. And so as part of being a blogger, and I had known the MLS CEO because I sat on the tech committee for the MLS, I did an interview with him when he left. Just, where are you going? Why are you going to Zillow? Who's going to take your place? I'm not a journalist by any stretch of the means. So this was no crack deep investigative journalistic reporting. It was just a really simple interview with the guy. Where are you going? Why are you going? And what's going to happen to Armless when you leave? And the CEO of Zillow, Spencer Raskoff, had always thanked me whenever I wrote an article. Just a real quick message. He'd send something, usually a private message on Twitter, and said, hey, thanks for the great article on Zillow. We appreciate it. And he never did that with this piece that I did on our MLS CEO, which was no big deal. That's not why I wrote the article. But 2 or 3 months after this transition happened, the CEO of Zillow messaged me on Twitter, and he said, hey, I forgot to thank you for writing that article about Bob. And I was like, hey, it's no big deal. Don't worry about it. And he replied to that message, and he said, you should come to Zillow and join the fun. And I looked at my wife, and I said, what does that mean? I should come to Zillow and join the fun. And she said, sounds like he wants you to come work for Zillow. And so I just messaged him right back, and I said, "Don't tempt me," with a little smiley face. And I swear to God, 5 minutes later, the phone rang, and it was Spencer's admin. She said, "Spencer wants to bring you up to Zillow just to talk to you. Are you available next Tuesday?" And this was like Thursday. And I'm like, well, I looked at my wife again. She kind of shrugged her shoulders and said, what could it hurt to talk to him? So up I flew to Seattle. And I was just expecting to talk to Spencer when I came in. And I walked in the lobby. Someone from HR walks out and goes, "Here's your interview schedule." And I look down, and I'm talking to 9 people, and there's vice presidents, one of the co-founders, some of the C-level executives. And I'm like, holy crap, I'm here for a full-blown job interview that I've done absolutely no preparation for. But I got a tour of the facility. I fell in love with it. Just the energy here is amazing. And again, if you're a nerd or a geek at heart, you've got to love it here because there's so much going on. So as I'm walking around, watching all these people and talking to the management team I was interviewing with, I was thinking in the back of my head, this would be a really, really cool job. And of course, also in the back of my head, I'm like, I own a real estate brokerage. I've got 30 agents that depend on me, and I live in Phoenix. Zillow's in Seattle. What the heck's going to happen? And I said, well, who knows? I probably won't even get a job offer. Well, I did get a job offer, and then we just started thinking. And personally, the timing was really good for us. Our youngest child was about to graduate from high school. My father lives in a Seattle suburb, and he's getting a little older. And I've always, all my life, been a bit of a wanderer. I've never done the same job for more than a few years in a row. To be honest, I was getting a little tired of real estate brokerage and real estate sales. I love the real estate industry. And my thinking was, well, and what I really love about the real estate industry is being able to teach and help agents be successful. And I could do that as a brokerage owner with my 30 agents, or I could come to Zillow and I could help tens of thousands of agents be successful. So it was just a good fit people-wise. It was a good fit timing-wise. Now here I sit in a Zillow conference room talking to you.
Wow. No, that's pretty crazy how that all happened. I'm curious. So you went from the corporate world, which you got sick of, to your own business, which sounds like you maybe got a little tired of, back to the corporate world. Were the two different corporate worlds you're in completely different? It sounds like Zillow had probably a different environment than what you had before.
Zillow's a completely different environment. The company I worked for before, nothing against them. It was Motorola is who it was, and they've changed names a half a dozen times since then. But that was a big, giant conglomerate, 180,000 employees worldwide, big, giant corporate bureaucracy. Zillow, I come to Zillow, and I distinctly remember I told the co-founder in my second interview, the last thing I ever want to do is work in a corporate environment. And then he walked out, and the next interviewer came in. I said, I think I just blew it because I told the co-founder I don't ever want to work at a company, and here I am sitting in a company's headquarters. But Zillow's very different. It's like what most people envision Google and Facebook being like. It's a very casual office environment. There's no really politics or bureaucracy. If you want to make a change at Zillow, if you've got data to show that your change makes sense, they'll let you test it out. I mean, I've seen things happen at Zillow changes happen here in hours that in my previous corporate life, honestly, would take months to get through all the bureaucracy to make some change. And here we move so fast. Yeah, we all wear a badge, and there's 2,000 Zillow employees now, but it's nothing like working in corporate America. It's very much very entrepreneurial driven. The management team has done a remarkable job of trying to kind of keep that startup attitude and atmosphere. So it's totally different than working corporate America.
Oh, very cool. And speaking of Zillow, I have a few questions. I know most everybody knows what Zillow is now, some of the things they do, but I have a couple. One, I hopefully you know this. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I just thought of it. What does Zillow mean? Where did that name come from?
That's a great question. It actually comes from a conglomeration of the phrase zillions of pillows. And it's kind of silly if you think about it, but Zillow's it's a made up word. But it came from, originally the founders thought we're going to have this big giant website that's going to be filled with data, right? Data on homes and neighborhoods and everything housing. So we've got tons and tons of data points. Pillows are what's kind of a home thing, and so zillions of pillows became Zillow. Kind of
Wow,
weird,
that
but that's where it started.
had no idea on that one. That's interesting.
Most people don't.
Very cool. So you said Zillow began around 2006. What was it meant to be when it first started? Was it were they going to list
Honestly,
properties online?
Yeah, that was the big thing. Well, here's the story that the co-founders tell, and the co-founders are two incredibly bright guys by the name of Rich Barton and Lloyd Frank. And they had worked together forever at Microsoft, which was also headquartered in Seattle. And they ran Expedia, the travel conglomerate, when it was actually, a lot of people don't realize that Expedia actually started as a Microsoft, whatever, subsidiary, division, group, whatever they call it. And then Expedia spun off into a public company. So Rich and Lloyd, this is the story they tell, and it's fascinating. They were looking, one of them, I don't remember which one, was looking to buy a home, and he was on the phone with an agent, and he could hear her typing. He was saying things like, well, I'm interested in 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, this part of town, and he could hear the agent typing. And Rich and Lloyd are both the kind of people that are like, what is she typing? What is she seeing? I want to see what she, the agent, is seeing, and why can't I see this information? I want my hands on the secret database. So Rich and Lloyd, the co-founders, are very big on bringing data out to the public. They kind of did that with Expedia, right? They're like, okay, here's all this travel data. And we've got these big giant databases of planes that can go from point A to point B. Why not let the people see that? And so they kind of felt the same way about the real estate stuff when they were looking to buy a house. Nobody really knew when they heard that agent typing on the other end of the phone, what is it that they're looking at? And so Zillow really just kind of started that way. They're like, I want to bring this data out. And because data just, with the internet and everything else, data wants to, it sounds hokey, data wants to be free. And so they wanted to kind of free the data. And when Zillow first launched, they didn't even have listings. They had developed the Zestimate, which is kind of an algorithm to make a guess at the value of a house. There weren't any listings on Zillow for the first couple of years. I mean, it was really just kind of a property database. They would go in and what's the right word I'm looking for? You go into public record sources and extract information on properties. So they basically decided to build a huge database that in theory would have every property in the United States on it and all the public information that's available, beds, baths, when it was built, lot size, construction type, all that kind of thing. And so it basically started as a big giant database. Then like any startup, at some point, someone goes, how are we going to monetize this? How are we going to make money off of it? We can't just all work in a big giant database and give everything away for free because, capitalism requires and life requires you to have a salary. So that's when putting listings on the site and selling advertising to agents on those listings kind of grew out of that. And so that's what we've got today, roughly 110 million properties on Zillow, which is just about every property in the country, plus listings, plus FSBOs, plus now we do agent training, we've got apps, we've got all kinds of stuff. But fundamentally, we're an advertising company that sells ads to real estate agents. We're kind of today's version of the classified ads in the newspaper.
Right. Nope, that makes sense. And we have been Zillow Premier agents as well, so we're very familiar with how that works and the advertising. What are some of the challenges Zillow has had? Because I know in our office there's been debate about not letting Zillow have our IDX feed from MLS because we feel like we might be, left out if we're not paying for advertising. There's been some discussion on that. So has Zillow had some pretty big challenges getting those listings?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a fair thing to say. Listing data, by its very nature, agents tend to kind of hold listing data close to their chest. They want to protect the listing data, which is totally understandable because for decades, at least years, that was kind of the real estate agent's secret sauce. I'm talking way before the internet, long before I ever bought a house, but you hear all the stories. You used to have to physically walk into a real estate office and somebody would slide a big 3-ring binder across the table at you and say, these are the available houses. Let's flip through this thing, find a couple houses that interest you, and go off and see them. So real estate agents and brokers really had control of the listing data. When that became free, when that got out, and by free I don't mean zero cost, I mean it became out there where anybody with an internet connection could access listing data. I think what happened is a lot of agents felt some fear and some angst. They were like, oh, this company is coming in here and they're taking away my thing, my thing being the control of the listing data. But the simple fact is agents do so much more than just have listing data, right? I mean, that's the easy part. Finding the house is the easy part. It's getting through the real estate transaction where good agents really are worth every dime that they're paid. Because again, real estate transactions are complicated. There's a ton of paperwork. Most people, I think the NAR says most people buy a home every 7 or 8 years. So it's not like, you're going down to the grocery store and buying a 6-pack, something that you're used to doing all the time. This is something that you do once every 7, 8, 10 years. It's very cryptic. There's tons of paperwork. So that's really where the agent's job is, we think, and it seems to be coming true. Rather than being the keeper of the data, the real estate agent now has to interpret the data for the consumer, because there's tons of data out there. But just because there's listings and copies of contracts, and I mean, I guess you could say all the data and all the stuff you need to do a real estate transaction is available online, but you've got to have an expert help you get through that process, and that's what agents do now. So to the original question, one of the areas of concerns that we've had at Zillow is how do we do what we want to do, and that is sell agents advertising without them being afraid that we're trying to take their job, which we're not. That's the last thing we want. We don't want to become a brokerage. We certainly don't want to become an MLS. We just want to sell ads to real estate agents. We want them to be wildly successful, and part of that is completely selfish, because if a real estate agent or broker is wildly successful with Zillow advertising, what do? They buy more of it. They write bigger checks. So we want to partner with real estate agents. And in the beginning, that was a tough pill for a lot of agents to swallow. Particularly with our founders coming from Expedia, travel agents kind of went away after Expedia and similar sites came out. So I think it was a natural thing for agents to feel, oh, look, these guys disrupted the travel agency business. They kind of helped usher travel agents away. They're going to do the same thing to real estate agents. And that's not the plan. The more successful agents are, then the more successful we are. So that's probably our biggest challenge, though, is trying to demonstrate to real estate agents that, hey, we're really partners in this. We're not antagonists. We don't want your job. You don't want our job. Let's take our skills and merge them with your skills and make us all more money.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I've talked to a lot of agents and heard a lot of opinions online about the value of agents and what they really bring now. And it's funny that Expedia was started by the same companies, because that's kind of my examples. Real estate is so different from travel, because every single piece of real estate in the world is different. It sits in a different piece of land, and valuing it, knowing the state and local laws, all of it's different from city to city, neighborhood to neighborhood. And it's just not something like a car or a vacation that you can value.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Computers are really good. I flew down to Phoenix the other day for my daughter's college graduation, and all I need is a database that'll say, okay, I'm in Seattle. I want to get to Phoenix on this date at this time for the cheapest amount possible. And that's what computers are really good at, sifting through a bunch of data and saying, oh, you need flight number 762 on Southwest. That's the best option you have. That is totally different from buying a home. It's completely different from buying a home. I don't think you'll ever be able to log onto a website and buy a home online. I just can't see it happening. Now, there will be some efficiencies that are gained. I would love to see. I'm sure you're an agent. You've walked into a title company before and literally seen stacks of paper, 6 feet deep on a desk. That's kind of crazy in this day and age if you think about it. So I can see technology streamlining some stuff in the real estate industry, but there's no way that a website or an app is ever going to be able to get a human being through a real estate transaction. I just don't see it happening.
Right. Nope, I agree with you. And yes, the title companies are kind of crazy in that way with their paperwork. And I'm a listing broker with HUD. So I mean, with them, you're still overnighting packages,
Yep.
original documents to them. So it's, a few things that can be improved in the industry.
Absolutely. But that won't
Yep.
take the place of the agent. That's just going to make the agent more efficient, if anything else, and allow them to sell more houses, which is
Right. Yep. Exactly. And then the point you said about Zillow becoming a brokerage as well and taking over, I don't know if people realize that there's so many different MLSs, there's so many different state laws and regulations, and the sheer, I mean, I don't know what it would take for a company to take over the entire country's, listing houses and trying to sell them. It would be a nightmare. And then they would take on all the liability as well that comes with that, of knowing all that. And basically they'd have individual brokers in every city, which would just be what there is now. So I don't,
and then you've got to monitor all that. You got to make sure that all the compliance is done, the state regs are followed. It would be a logistical nightmare, and it's just not what we're good at. If I walk around the halls at Zillow, there's probably 7 or 8 people here, including myself, that have a real estate license. They were either a salesperson or a broker before. That's 7 or 8 people out of 2,000, right? We're good at building apps and building websites. We're not good at selling real estate. That's just not what we do. We hired 90% of these 2,000 employees to code and develop and build applications and websites. That's what we're good at. Most real estate agents aren't so good at developing websites and apps. They're good at working with people and closing transactions. So you guys, being the agents in the broker community, need to go off and do your thing, and we need to go off and do our thing. And if we can connect these two and can help each other, then all the better. But we have none desire to become a brokerage or an MLS. It would be a logistical nightmare.
Yes, no, I agree. Speaking of Zillow and agents, maybe you can give some tips or some insight on how agents can work with Zillow to help them make more money, what tools Zillow has for agents to use.
Sure. The first thing I do is I encourage people to use our training. It's all free. We've got very good trainers, and that's probably where we actually tap true real estate experience. There's a handful of people in our sales group, for example, that used to sell real estate. So we have a really good training program. It's all online. It's at Zillow.com/academy. It's called Zillow Academy. It doesn't cost anything. Now, some of our training classes are geared towards very Zillow-specific things, like how to ask for reviews, how to build a stronger profile. But I'm not trying to sell or pitch Zillow, but I think you'd be crazy to be a real estate agent in today's world and not at least have a profile on Zillow. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. There's no question, no matter what you think of Zillow as an entity or a company, we get a ton of consumers looking at our site, which includes listings and agent profiles. I talk to agents every day that never spend a nickel on Zillow advertising, but they have a very strong profile on Zillow, and they've gotten calls and leads and listings from people finding their profile on Zillow. So why not have one of those? So build that free profile, take advantage of our trainings. A lot of our training, while it may be kind of geared towards Zillow, is still very generic in that, but by that I mean converting leads. Okay, I don't care where you get your leads from. Well, I care. I would rather you get your leads from Zillow than, say, Realtor.com. But let's be honest, there's a lot of people that use both Zillow and Realtor.com. They have their own website, a brokerage website. They do farming. However, they get a contact. When you get a contact as an agent, whether that's somebody at a gas station, exchanging business cards, or it's an online lead, converting that lead into a customer is really, really important, because you can have all the leads in the world, but if you can't convert them into commission checks, then what good do they do? So we have lots of training on how to do that. It won't just be Zillow specific. So take advantage of the free training. Take advantage of a free profile. I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but Zillow advertising probably isn't for everybody. You need to have good systems in place to manage lead flow. You need good systems in place to follow up with contacts, because internet leads in general can be a little further up the sales funnel. Now, we do get agents that'll say, hey, I got a call yesterday from some guy that said, I saw your profile on Zillow, I read your reviews, come list my house. I'm not talking to anybody else. I've already decided you're the listing agent for us. Can you come over tomorrow at 2 o'clock? Now, that's a really cool phone call to get. and it does happen. But you can do things to make that happen rather than just rely on random chance. And again, that's having a good, rich profile. Put all your past sales on there. I think reviews are super important because I think consumers may value reviews more than they should. There's all kinds of reports out there that consumers believe online reviews more than they believe word of mouth advertising, which is hard to believe, but it's true. I mean, everybody on the planet uses reviews. I have yet to run into anybody, anywhere that has never looked at a review, either of a the typical restaurant books and movies, but now more and more people are looking for reviews for service professionals, mechanics, doctors, lawyers, CPAs, real estate agents. So get those reviews. As means of our training, gosh, what else can you do? It's important, again, to have systems in place. I want people to be successful with Zillow advertising. And that makes sense for us as a business, right? We would much rather have an advertising agent be successful because then they keep writing us checks. They're the successful agents. We don't have to worry, if they're a 6-month contract, are they going to renew at the end of it? Well, if they're killing it, they're going to renew. They just are. So take advantage of our training. If you are a Zillow advertising agent, it's really important to have a good working relationship with your sales rep, what we call a business consultant, because that's really what they are more than just a sales guy. They are business consultants. They're there to help you understand the advertising inventory that we have, how you can best utilize it. And our best business consultants are just that. They're consultants. I've had so many agents tell me, hey, I look at my business consultant at Zillow as part of my team. This is the guy or gal that understands what's going on at Zillow. They call me when inventory is available. The good ones, which there are plenty of, will say, there's a bunch of advertising impressions available in this zip code, but I don't think that really meets what you're looking for. I would go over here. So have a really good relationship with your business consultant. That's super important. And then have the systems in place to follow up on your contacts. You've got it. Just the nature of the internet consumer, they want information right away. So when they fill out a form on Zillow that says contact an agent, they click the button, contact an agent. They expect you to reply within minutes. And there's ways to do that. We have some systems in place, and we have a CRM that allows you to set up autoresponders and things like that. So really understanding the tools. I'm always amazed at how many agents pay Zillow for advertising but don't really understand or use all of the tools that we have, the support type tools that we have to help them convert those leads. Because again, conversion is key, right? Again, if you have 10,000 leads and not a single one of them converts, then what good does it do you? I'd rather have 10 leads than have 2 of them convert.
Right. And working with Zillow, we've set up those autoresponders where emails come out right away. It's made a huge difference. And it's funny because I'm in Colorado and I invest here a lot with rentals and flips, but I've been looking to invest in Florida just because the market's so much easier to buy down there. And I started contacting agents and using Zillow, and 1 out of 3 of them might respond. It's crazy. Like, I'll send an email, I'll tell them I'm looking to buy, who I am, all this stuff, and they don't even respond to me ever. I'm just like, wow. And then people wonder why the average income for agents is so low.
Yeah. It's again, this is going to sound hokey. I used to tell my agents this when I was a broker, and now I tell Zillow's advertising agents, the best thing you can do to improve your business is answer your phone. It really is. We get an unbelievable number of consumers will call Zillow, believe me, because we get 130 million consumers a month on our site. And we don't want to get a call from a consumer that says, you know what, I clicked contact an agent 6 times on Zillow and nobody ever replied to me. And these are people that are paying for the leads. They're writing us a check to get these phone calls, and then they don't do anything with it, and then they say your leads are bogus. Well, you can't possibly know that because you never contacted the lead. You've got to answer the phone.
Yep.
Or email or follow up. Do that and you'll be miles ahead of a lot of other people.
Oh yeah, for sure. Very cool. Great information. Now I have one last question and I'll let you get out of here. Are there any goals? Is there anything Zillow's looking to add or bring into the future, or are they just kind of focused on their core business right now?
That's a really good question. This question comes up a lot. Because I hear it a lot. I'm out in the social space a lot. That's what I do as part of my job. And I hear questions like, when's Zillow coming to Canada? When are you going international? When is it going to get bigger? And our answer to that is, we've got so much work still to do on what we're working on right now, U.S. focused. Will we go to Canada and Europe and Australia? I don't know, probably at some point. Commercial real estate comes up a lot. We're going to get into commercial. What we really want to do is focus on our core business and get it super, super solid before we look to go off and start branching out. Now, that's not to say that we're just kind of sitting back on our heels and watching stuff happen. We do so much testing on Zillow.com. It blows me away. Again, I've said it before, I'm a geek and I'm a nerd at heart. And when I talk to our developers, and we do what's called A/B testing, where we will present a web page of one version to 1 million people, then present a different version of the web page to 1 million people so that we can figure out which pages work best. And we test everything, down to the placement of the contact an agent button, what color that button is. Because internet leads is a big volume-driven business, right? It's a numbers game. So if we can change a button that says contact an agent from blue to green and see a 2% increase, that may not sound like much, but when you're talking 130 million visitors a month, 2%, that's a lot of people. So we test the crap out of everything, and we're constantly tweaking the site, tweaking the tools that we have, and we will continue to do that. But I think we've got an awful lot of room left to grow just in the U.S., there's still so much more to go. We figure that we being Zillow Group, and Zillow Group is primarily Zillow, Trulia. There's a site in New York City called Street Easy and Naked Apartments. Those are subsidiaries of ours. But Zillow Group as a whole, we figure we capture about 4 to 5% of what agents spend in online marketing. So if you think about that, that's an awful lot of room for growth. Because this is a lot of times people say, you're going to have to become a brokerage because that's the only way you can make more money. No, we've got like a 4 or 5% market share of online advertising spend. That means we have 95%. Now, we're never going to get it all, of course. But point being, tons and tons and tons and tons of room to grow domestically just by improving our systems and our processes before we even start to go wider. That's what we focus on is building the right tools to help agents be more successful converting the leads that they get from us. That'll keep them busy for a long time.
Yes, that makes sense. With 130 million consumers a month, that can keep you very busy, and there's a lot of opportunity there. It's funny because I do A/B testing on my site as well. Now, I wish I had 1 million people to test, but unfortunately, I don't. Sure. I'm not there yet. But
and that's the beauty of it. That allows us so much flexibility. Just that volume is a huge thing. Because I had a website too as a broker that did pretty good, and I A/B tested things too. But you can't do it at the level that we can do it just because of the traffic that we have.
Right. Nope, that's awesome. Well, great. Well, I think those are all the questions I had. Any advice, any parting thoughts you want to give to agents out there who are looking to get in the industry, or maybe they're struggling a little bit in their career before we head out of here?
Answer your phone. And part of answering the phone is make the phone ring. And honestly, there's lots and lots of ways to do that. There's Zillow advertising. But there's so many, geo-farming a neighborhood. Gosh, door knocking. Not really my thing, but I know people that are wildly successful with it. Point being, you don't necessarily, particularly for new agents or struggling agents, I'm sure someone's going to hear this and go, well, I don't have $2,000 a month to spend on Zillow advertising. Well, first of all, you don't have to spend that much, but do something else. Join your Chamber of Commerce, join your HOA board, get yourself out in front of people, sponsor a little league team. All these things, put your name on a bus bench. That stuff still works. There's a reason it works, and it always has worked. So get out there and get in front of people. You got to meet people. Now, I am a big fan of using a site like Zillow to meet people electronically, But if you're new and just starting out and struggling and don't have those kind of systems in place, then go out and meet people the good old-fashioned way. Walk up to somebody at the gas station and shake their hand and say, hey, I'm a real estate agent. Here's my card. Let me know if you're ever interested in buying or selling a house. If you did that 10 times a day, every day, you'd probably be a very successful agent, successful than most others.
No, that's
Get out there
great.
and work it.
Yep. Great advice. And yeah, there's so many people who I think use technology and try to bring in these leads, but then, like you said, they don't answer their phone or they hide behind a computer. They don't go out there and take advantage of those leads. Oh, exactly. Awesome. Well, Jay, loved having you on the podcast. A lot of great information. I learned a lot myself, including the zillions of pillows meaning.
There you go.
Yep. Thank you for being on the show. Hopefully we can keep in touch, and great job.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Let's do it again sometime.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you, Jay.
All right. You bet.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.